구속의 시기요 Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have my good brother here in the temple, the master of the Monarch's Tribunal, and the man going on adventures with me every month, good brother Monarch.
I have no random opening for anyone today. I'm just sitting here thinking back to the beginning of this little escapade into Shroud of the Ancients. I keep trying to call it Shroud of the Avatar for some reason. I never even played that game.
Well, of course you didn't. Nobody did. At least not in the way it was intended. Whereas this game actually exists.
But yes, when we talk character creation, I think we both kind of walked away feeling it was a little on the bloated side.
A little bit messy. It definitely feels like something I would have seen in the early 2000s. And that's not exactly a compliment in this case.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those games had some bad habits. And this is kind of in that same ballpark. Is it as bad as some of those games that had those bad habits? No. Is this as bad of an offender as Valhalla? Oh god, no.
No. That said, since we still really don't have a grasp for mechanics, that's all we really had to latch onto for that first bit was the stuff that stood out as not good.
Mm-hmm. Now, admittedly, because this chapter focuses on the equipment stuff, there's going to be a lot of skimming. This is probably going to be a shorter episode.
Yeah.
But it opens up with the economy of Aegis, and the conversion setup is 1 gold equals 10 silver, 10 silver equals 100 copper, so a rule of 10, which is, I'd
pretty
say,
standard way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It does note silver is the standard.
Mm-hmm. Which would make sense. Then going into property and ownership and all that entails. Then death and taxes.
I'll note this is talking about something called the Shattering, which hasn't really been mentioned. Except probably in the little aside pictures we've been skimming over. It's possible it's come up in some of those.
Pretty much.
But whatever this Shattering is, it seems very important to the setting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say about one of the few things that's might be worth reading here is the material scarcity bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because that seems like it's going to give us a bit of info on the actual setting we haven't gotten yet. So,
yeah.
It is said that before the Shattering, resources were abundant, animals flourished, and crops were plentiful. In these times, the citizens of Aegis still depend on the druids, the governess, and the monger houses to maintain the crops and other precious resources. Through careful planting and allocation of labor, as well as magical incantations, the realm ensures that the cities are provided enough food for all to eat. Citizens who live isolated on in smaller villages are more independent and must do what they can to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of our first look at the setting we're dealing with here. Something happened. Everything got fucked up.
Mm-hmm. But where that plays into a factor is the scarcity rank. This can affect the target number i.e., it's harder to get things that are more scarce. If something's ubiquitous, no mod. If it's rank 1, it's accessible 5, and it goes up from 5 to there. And it is noted
that scarce includes a rapier.
Mm-hmm. And items with a scarcity rank of 3 or more may not be available to you at character creation. But you do...
Interesting.
You do have to spend 90% of your starting resources on goods and equipment. The remaining 10% represents the amount you would be able to convert into coin.
I did mention interesting is under rare we have artisan's tools. So if I'm reading that right, you're not intended to be able to start with the tools of a trade? Depending on how vague artisan's tools is used in this system.
Mm-hmm. Then we start with exploration gear, and there is a lot, as you can see.
We do have a nice full-page listing.
Mm-hmm.
At a quick glance, it's kind of what you'd expect in a fantasy setting.
Mm-hmm. Then we have a similar thing for professional tools and equipment, as well as superior quality, which having better quality stuff increases the scarcity rating, but also the cost multiplier, but does give a bonus to checks.
Now, one thing I will note here, just because it's something of interest, a blank book has a scarcity of 4, which is quite high in this system.
Mm-hmm.
That's worth noting just because I think it gives an insight to the state of the world where a blank book is a hard to come by item.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming craftsman's tools are your artisan's tools, because there's no artisan's tools listed. So I'm going to assume that's an artifact that never quite got fixed in the final edit.
We also have a thing on clothing. If you have superior clothing, you can add bonuses to skills like carousing, gather information, morale bolster, etc. It's going to depend on what your Shroud Master thinks. We do have a bit of a talk on food, lodging, and recreation. And the chart on clothing. So it is interesting that apparently straw hats are only recently popular.
Yeah. And something I think worth noting for the quality, higher quality is going to increase the rating, but if it increases past 5, which is where the chart ends, it does specify the Game Master has to decide if that's even going to be available.
Mm-hmm.
Which I do like that little note there.
Yep. But then we have herbs and plants, which the chart for it goes into what the healing is, how to prepare it, and the scarcity, as well as what it does. Which is a nice little detail.
Yeah.
But then we get to weapons. There's going to be quite a few. And the format is as follows. Obviously, melee weapons are first, then how much it costs, the weapon rank, i.e. the difficulty to master and or maintain, and the amount of damage it inflicts in D5s. Minimum might, i.e. how much the minimum might score you need to have in order to use it without penalty. If you try to use one that has a minimum might higher than your might, that takes a might check equal to the minimum might score, and an additional 5 for each variance in might. Then we have type, which is, the type of weapon. Hands, which is it one-handed or two-handed? Then reach, is it the standard adjacent reach or is it something further? Weight and scarcity.
Now, there is something I'm going to point out. If you look at the actual chart, there will be specific notes. However, if you see Dagger Trident, there's no notes. But if you actually read the description of Dagger Trident, there is unique modifiers for using it. In this case, +5 to the wielder's parry attempt.
Mm-hmm.
So, just a note, you'll need to look at the actual weapon description as well to find out what it does. If there happens to be any variance. Not all weapons have a unique thing like that.
It is unfortunate that C description couldn't be put in those rows.
Yeah. That would have been nice.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of the weapons are ones that we've more or less seen before. The one I'm curious about is the Cavistus. This is a 7-foot long polearm with the last 3 feet being a curved blade with one serrated edge. In trade speak, it translates roughly as gutter. Okay. But then we have a similar thing with ranged weapons. I'm not entirely sure why some of the ranged weapons have such high of a might requirement. Like, why does a sling have a might requirement of 6?
Huh.
Or why does something like a bolus have a might requirement?
Because I'm trying to think off the top of my head how high a 6 was. Because I think that's a little above average, isn't it?
Yeah.
For a sling.
Now, I can understand the might requirements for the bows, because you do need a certain amount of arm and chest strength in order to pull a bow proper. Especially things like those big-ass English longbows. But a might rating of 4 for dart? What?
I don't know. Nothing is less than a 4 on this.
Mm-hmm. Let me see what the requirements were. I guess 4 is going to be the equivalent of light weapons, because the knife has a might requirement of 4.
So less than 4, I guess you're just not strong enough to use a weapon?
No, you can use it, you're just penalized. Or rather, you have to do a might check based on the difference.
I don't think I like this because of how high these numbers are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is an easy, quick house rule fix. Like, of course, you should be able to use a sling without a 6. That seems ridiculous.
Pretty much. I will note I do like the spread here showing the examples of each weapon.
Yes.
Wait, that's a Kestis. Let me see what the requirement for that is. So to use I didn't find Kestis, but to use a gauntlet as a weapon, you need a might of 7, and same with a garrote.
I don't get the rationale behind this might requirements on these weapons.
You know, when Sword World had the strength requirement for its weapons, it made sense because it was doing that same gradual escalation with each of the weapon types in the vein of like a console RPG. But that's not the case here.
It just feels arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
I think is the way I'd put it.
Yeah. But then we have a similar kind of quality multiplier when it comes to superior quality weapons. And then we have armor. You know, which is listing the armor name, the cost, the armor rank, how complex the armor is. The higher the rank, the more difficult it is to maneuver in, maintain, and repair. More intricate armors also take longer to don. And then we have armor value. This is similar to structural value for materials. When a normal hit occurs, subtract the armor value from the damage and apply it to the wearer's strength. When a critical hit is rolled, the AV score is deducted from that total. Then we have armor toughness, i.e. structural integrity. This is how much damage it can take. And scarcity, type, and weight. So armor is damage reduction, but it seems that it's damage reduction, but only to a certain point. This does mean that we kind of hinted at this when it came to items, but this game does do equipment durability.
Yeah. I will say it's when a critical hit is scored, it's hitting the durability. So for
or
a normal
10
attack,
damage.
it's not. Oh, or 10 damage?
Mm-hmm.
Is that 10 damage in a single hit, or?
I think that's the implication.
For 10 damage, it absorbs 80. That I would like them to specify, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not for 10 in a single hit, but for every 10 it absorbs overall. So if you get hit 2 times for 5 each, you'd reduce it.
Yeah.
I believe that's how it's intended to work.
Though, I've made no bones about the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of equipment durability in most games. And here it's no exception. I do like this sidebar that we have about buying armor by the piece, which just determines how much percentage of the total cost it would actually cost you. That's something a lot of people don't consider. And then we have the same thing for superior quality when it comes to armor. And a similar thing with helms. With some of them having penalties to certain checks. Mostly because of the fact that your whole head is being covered. And we have a similar thing for shields. The armor rank, armor value, and armor toughness. And the notes involved. After that is superior quality when it comes to shields, and then item repair skill.
And don't get me wrong. I think it's kind of dumb it's split amongst this many skills.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to do it, it's nice to have a chart that specifies what you would need for each item.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it this way.
But it is a skill check, one that takes an hour on its own and repairs 5 damage to the given equipment. It's often based on the damage severity, as we can see here, which can modify the roll. But oh, never mind. But then we have creating an item. Oh, there's no custom item creation. It's just creating standard equipment, as well as the skill needed to use and the amount of time it takes to make it. And that more or less covers equipment. Like I said, this was going to be a short one. And I think the only real problem we end up having has to do with the might requirement. Putting aside the fact that I do think it's a little bit overkill to have a certain requirement of both skill and attribute for these things, because there was the equipment rank and then there's the minimum might. Though when it comes to the ranged weapons having required might levels, that strikes me as a bit odd.
I don't mind it for most of them, but for a minimum for any of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically saying if you don't have at least a 4 might, depending on how bad the penalty ends up playing out, we haven't seen how the D5 system itself is actually going to play. I think we run the risk of you just don't use a weapon. What's the point?
Yeah, we saw some of it, but I think we can do more.
Yeah.
Oh.
Again, like, if you're gonna use this system and that is a problem, it's an easy fix, just lower the might requirements.
Mm-hmm. That being said, and I'm checking the first chapter to see if I can nail down what the start. So, 8 or 9 is considered average. Standard races have attribute ranges from 1 to 25.
Okay, these might requirements I'm thinking aren't so bad now. For some reason, I was remembering them a little lower.
That being
said...
So
4 doesn't seem so bad anymore.
That being said, that only makes it slightly better, because you still have the problem of this being a very point-buy system. And you know how in games like Pathfinder, dexterity can be kind of a god stat because of all the things it affects? I think there's the potential for that to happen with might. Where if you're going to be using any equipment beyond the bare minimums, you need to invest might points. And
I'm trying to think, were there minimum stats that you would expect to have?
Oh.
Because I don't think you'd ever really count on having something below 3 anyway.
Possibly not.
So I don't know if that'd be an issue with the number like 4.
Personally, I would be in favor of just getting rid of the whole minimum might thing, except in very special circumstances.
Yeah.
You know, like
yeah,
because
if you're not really going to expect someone to have less than 4 anyway, what's the point in having that there at all?
Yeah. Also, I do think it's doubling down by having minimums in both attribute and skill, because that is requiring a bit of pre-planning.
Yeah. I
At least.
think right now that's kind of the big thing over this is all of those skills.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Now, admittedly, the way making items work, the fact that we have item creation is going to be nice. The whole thing with item repair is nice, but if I'm being honest, I cannot recall that many times where I've used item durability.
And something like Pathfinder, it's really only relevant if you're attacking it specifically.
But since you're going in dungeons so often, and dungeons involve monsters, you don't really have as much impetus to use that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's only in very specific circumstances. Like, say, a rust monster.
Mm-hmm. Which a DM can always pull to make the players sorry that the DM was ever doubted. But I'm not sure if that's a sound strategy for the designer.
Yeah.
And
now, because of the scarcity of everything here, I kind of see why the game wants to do it. It wants all of your stuff to like feel important that you have this weapon, that you would need to take care of it because it's not something you're just going to be able to easily replace.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of see what they're going for here.
I can see that, but at the same time, I'm not questioning the intention. I'm questioning the result.
Yeah. The result, I think it's going to come down to how punishing this die system ends up being.
Yeah. That being said, I'm surprised that there wasn't a whole lot of stats regarding lodging and the like. I mean, it's talked about, but you'd think that that would get at least a few paragraphs worth of chart. But here it did not. And ultimately, I think when it comes to equipment, this one's decent, but it feels like it's the minimum viable product when it comes to how its equipment is handled. There's also the fact that a lot of the stuff for repair isn't in the cheat sheet in the back, so that's a bit of an issue. But I think that more or less covers things. I realize this is a short one. We're only going a little over 30 minutes, but there wasn't a whole lot to the equipment aside from the observations we made, which definitely don't paint things in the best of light.
Like, I think we're kind of at a point here where everything's kind of gonna live or die based off what the D5 system's going to end up looking like, which is what we're going to be talking about next week.
Yeah, we kind of got a hint at it that you're rolling a set number of D10s and treating them as 5-sided dice. And you're always rolling that set number of dice. You're never rolling more or less dice. But I'm not sure if that's enough. So things will certainly be interesting come next week. But tune in tomorrow as Sieg and I continue our look through Tokyo Nova. So that should be an interesting affair. And of course, we'll be back here next week, and I will be back here on Saturday with more of Untold Destiny. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody. Oh.
心体。